So I am super excited to talk to our next guest this morning. Katie Wilson is the co-founder and executive director of the Transit Writers Union. She is also the progressive candidate for mayor in the city of Seattle, locked in an extraordinarily close race with the current mayor, Bruce Harrell, and she joins us now. Welcome, Katie.
Great to be here, Krystal.
Yeah, of course. So I've been following your race for the past couple of weeks. There's an incumbent who's more, I think, politically centrist. You're more the progressive, kind of insurgent, outsider candidate coming in. Very close race all the way along. And as of yesterday, based on the mail drops, you have now taken a 91 vote lead. So first question for you, just give us a little bit of a sense of the dynamics of this race, what ballots still remain, and whether your expectation is that you will be the next mayor of the city of Seattle.
Yeah, so the way that we do elections here in Washington State is that it's all by mail. So everyone mails in their ballots. We also have ballot drop boxes around the city. And there's a very consistent pattern that more progressive voters, younger voters, tend to vote late. And so what you'll see is that the election night results, there's actually a large shift between election night and the final results toward the more progressive or left-leaning candidate. So on election night, I was at 46%. Now I've pulled ahead by 91 votes, as you said, and there's another about 10,000 ballots out there still to be counted, mostly from election day, mostly skewing younger. So we're really hopeful that that margin will widen. It's possible that there will be a recount because the margin will still be very small, but we're feeling really good about this race at this point.
Incredible. Absolutely incredible. So talk to us just a little bit for people who have not been following this race closely. As I confess, I actually wasn't until the last couple of weeks before the election. Tell people about the incumbent mayor, Bruce Harrell, your issues with his leadership, and then the platform that you were running on as a contrast.
Yeah, sure thing. So, I mean, my background, I'm a community organizer, a coalition builder. And so for the past 14 years, I've been leading this organization that I co-founded back in 2011 called the Transit Writers Union. And, we basically fight on economic justice issues. So I've led campaigns to raise the minimum wage to the highest in the country in several cities around King County, fought for stronger renter protections in Seattle and other cities around King County, fought for progressive taxation. So we have a landmark tax on wealthy corporations in Seattle called the Jumpstart tax that I played a big role in designing and passing. And then, of course, public transit, right, as the name of the organization suggests, fighting for better public transit. And we've won a bunch of affordable and free fare programs for lower income riders, for youth. So that's the kind of work that I've done over the years. It's very grassroots, community organizing, coalition building. And I really have never had the ambition to run for elected office until this year. And so early this year, we had an election on funding Seattle's new social housing developer through a tax on wealthy corporations. And our current mayor, Bruce Harrell, was kind of the face of the opposition campaign. And he's done a lot in office to try to undermine social housing, which is a kind of a new project for Seattle that a grassroots campaign put on the ballot last year. And nevertheless, this funding measure to fund the developer passed by a landslide. And so that really showed me that our current mayor, Bruce Harrell, is out of touch with the issues that people are facing in their daily lives. And I think the affordability crisis is really right up there at the top. And, when I jumped into this race, I'd never heard of Zohran, but it's very clear that there are some similar dynamics playing out across the country where coming out of the pandemic with really high rates of inflation, the cost of housing in high cost cities like Seattle is just really out of control. Rents just keep going up and up. Home prices are out of reach for anyone wanting to buy a home. And then everything else from childcare to food to groceries, everything is just really, really expensive. And people are feeling that, right? Not just the lowest income households, but people up to kind of middle class, people who have decent jobs are just like, can't believe how expensive everything is. So I think that's definitely a dynamic in this race where the work that I've done over the years and the what I want to tackle as mayor is this affordability crisis. And really, we also have this extremely bad homelessness crisis here in Seattle. We actually have rates of unsheltered homelessness that are much higher than comparable cities around the country in the US. And I really, our current mayor, Bruce Harrell, he came into office promising to address issues of homelessness and public safety. And I think people are looking around and not really feeling that he's succeeded at that. So that's kind of a local dynamic, but the national dynamic is affordability. And then I think also, obviously, Trump getting elected last fall, right? There's there's a certain brand of establishment Democratic Party politics, which utterly failed to stop the train wreck that was Trump's election. And so I think that there's a feeling that people want new leadership and leadership that's not going to cower like that. And I think our current mayor, he doesn't break that mold, right? Like he's been the mayor for 4 years, but before that he was a council member for 12 years. So he's kind of part of that kind of centrist Democratic Party establishment that people are pretty upset with right now. So I think that's also a dynamic in this race. And so for me, coming in as an outsider, someone who's worked with City Hall, is familiar with the legislative process and all that, but at the same time is coming in as kind of an insurgent candidate. This was just the right moment for that to work, and it looks like we're going to pull it out by the skin of our teeth.
Incredible. I'd love for you to dig a little bit more into the contrast in the approach of Bruce Harrell on homelessness versus, what approach did he take and what did you run on?
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, this is something that I didn't have super high expectations when he came into office, kind of knowing who he was from when he was on council, but I've been deeply disappointed relative to those expectations. So basically, the current administration's approach has been to sweep people around the city from place to place without actually getting people inside. So we basically have thousands of people sleeping unsheltered on the streets, and we have 2 homeless people in the Seattle area for every 1 shelter bed. And there's been very, very little focus of his administration on actually opening new emergency housing and shelters so that we can get people inside. Instead, they're spending all of this time and energy just basically telling people you can't be here and forcing them to move along. But then, like, where are they supposed to go? Right. And so that also contributes to our public safety problems, right? Because a lot of people have issues with drug addiction, mental illness, and those aren't being dealt with. And you can't really deal with those issues if you're sleeping outside. And so the fact that they're not actually focusing on getting people inside is just really damning in my mind. And people are noticing it, right? Like there's people who just resident small business owners in various neighborhoods around the city who, they see that there's like an encampment there and they know that they're like, okay, well, the city's going to come and sweep them, but we know that they're just going to go to the next neighborhood. And then a couple of weeks from now, they'll be back. And so there's this deep frustration with this approach. So, what I've been saying on the campaign trail is I'm going to really focus on opening new emergency housing and shelters so that we can actually resolve encampments by getting people inside rather than just sweeping them around the city. And we know that this works, right? So during the pandemic, there was a program that several nonprofits put together called Just Care, which basically did that, right? Resolved encampments by getting people inside. And at that time, it was kind of temporary hotels that had been repurposed as shelter. And it was very successful. So we know that the vast majority of homeless folks sleeping outside will accept meaningful offers of shelter and support when that's given to them. And that's just not what we're doing right now. So that's really the big difference in our approach there.
And what do you do with the more challenging cases, people who are suffering from addiction issues or from mental illness who don't want to accept that, that offer of shelter? How do you handle those cases?
Yeah, I mean, I think we know from practice that ends up being a fairly small percentage of the homeless population. But, the fact is we do have levers, right? So, our laws around involuntary commitment are governed at the state level. So changing those is pretty challenging. But here's the thing, like most people who are addicted to drugs, are also engaged in various forms of criminal behavior, right, in order to obtain drugs or just in order to meet basic needs. The homeless people, that is, right? And so we have the ability to, if necessary, arrest people for criminal behavior. And then we have successful diversion programs where, because we also know that just throwing someone in jail doesn't work, right? And then they're back out on the street and have been destabilized and are more at risk of overdosing. But what we can do is put people into a diversion program where there's basically accountability and there's shelter and services, but that's kind of like offered as an alternative to the booking and jail kind of route. And so we have programs that have been very successful. And so it's a matter of scaling those up. And I think that we can, if we do that well, I think that we can address those tougher cases or the vast majority of them as well.
And of course, chronic homelessness is a symptom of a larger housing crisis, as you were speaking to, which affects absolutely everyone. What are some of the, obviously we all know the ZOHRAN platform, he's freezing the rent on rent stabilized apartments, and then he wants to surge a building bonanza of additional 200,000 housing units. What are some of the things you ran on in terms of housing affordability? Because I know that is a major issue in the city of Seattle.
Yeah, totally. So there's a few things. So one is social housing, which I mentioned, right? And this is a model which is a little bit unfamiliar in Seattle and a lot of the United States, but similar to Vienna and Paris and other European cities, which have had really strong social housing sectors for a long time. And so the idea here is to begin to build a non-market housing sector that's mixed income. So here in Seattle would go up to 120% of area median income, which is a fairly high threshold. And then by having this like publicly owned and operated permanently affordable housing, once you get that to a certain scale, that also helps to moderate rents in the private sector. Now we're a long way from that, but there's no better time to start than now. So part of my platform is really having the city and the mayor be a strong partner in getting the new social housing developer up and rolling and acquiring buildings and developing buildings. At the same time, I also believe that we need to make it possible for the private market to build more housing in our great neighborhoods around Seattle. And so that means working on our land use and zoning laws to make that possible, because we have had very restrictive single family zoning laws in Seattle for a long time. And that's beginning to loosen up a little bit, but we can go a lot further than the previous administration has gone. In addition, so we are not allowed in local jurisdictions in Washington state to do rent regulation directly. So we can't do rent control here locally without a change in state law. However, we do have a law called the Economic Displacement Relocation Assistance Law, which basically says if your landlord raises your rent 10% or more and you move out because you can't afford it, your landlord is supposed to pay you 3 times your monthly rent in relocation assistance. So that's nice. And it also disincentivizes large rent increases because landlords don't want to trigger that law. And so one thing that I've talked about is bumping that threshold down from 10% to, for example, 5%. And so that would help to disincentivize those larger rent increases. There's some other things that we can do on the renter protections front, like regulating or banning rental junk fees, something that happens, especially if you have a corporate landlord in the United States. There's kind of the sticker price of your apartment, but then there's all these like hidden monthly fees or hidden annual fees that are kind of in the fine print. And so you end up paying a lot more than you think you were going to pay. So something that the city can do is also regulate or ban some of those kind of extraneous fees. So those are a couple of other ideas for how we can like help around the margins. The city can do more to invest in affordable homeownership programs. There's some other things too, but it's kind of a whole range of things, right? There's not one silver bullet, but we kind of need to do it all.
All of the above. Yeah. Katie, my last question for you is, I'd love for you to zoom out and talk a little bit more broadly about the political trends within Seattle. I saw a tweet about this, so forgive me, you can correct if this tweet analysis was incorrect. But basically they said, there were a lot of progressive legislators in Seattle. And then there was, after Black Lives Matter and the pandemic, there was kind of a backlash. And that's when people like Bruce Harrell and other more like centrist types get elected to the city council. And now with Harrell's likely defeat, that wave of the backlash wave has now been swept out by a more progressive cohort. And so first of all, is that sort of accurate, your view of the way that Seattle politics has swung back and forth? And then what is most important to you in order to make sure that there isn't another sort of backlash swing to the center after your mayoralty?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And so, yeah, I think the picture that you laid out is fairly accurate. So we had a pretty darn progressive city council for about a decade. And that included former council member Shama Sawant, who is, a socialist city council member. Now, one thing to note, though, is that during that time when we had a very progressive council, we had pretty centrist mayors. And so that really, that dynamic kind of cramped the council style in a sense, in terms of their ability to get things not just passed, but really like implemented well. And then yes, after 2020 and Black Lives Matter, there was a backlash. And so then we had actually our current mayor elected and a very, for Seattle, very, very centrist or right-leaning compared to usual city council. So this year, with hopefully my election, but then also a couple of council members and a new city attorney, things are swinging back in a progressive direction. Now, we have kind of staggered elections. So this year there was only, well, for complicated reasons, 3, but normally there would be 2 at-large council positions up for election. So there's 7 district council elections seats, which will be up for election in 2 years. So right now, assuming that I win this race, right, we'll have me in the mayor's office, and we'll have several very progressive council members, but the bulk of, we don't have a strong progressive majority on the council yet, but that could happen in 2027. Now, in order for that to happen in 2027, you asked about kind of what needs to be accomplished in the next couple of years. I really think that I have a lot of ambitious progressive policy dreams in my platform. But I really think what I'm going to be judged on, what my administration is going to be judged on first and foremost, is homelessness and public safety. And I really think that in the first couple of years, we're going to need to drill down and make progress on those really basic quality of life issues. And show, I think we have an opportunity here for people on the progressive left to basically show that we can actually govern. And so there's going to be, I'm going to be paying a lot of attention to the work that needs to happen to basically get City Hall, the city bureaucracy, moving in a good direction, actually delivering services for the people of Seattle, and hopefully pioneering a new model of kind of responsive government and communication with the people, where we're really explaining what we're doing and why, and if we're coming up against obstacles, here's why. And I think this is a similar challenge that I think Mamdani's going to face in New York City, where there's a lot of really ambitious things that we want to get done, but there's also real obstacles, right? It's like the reason why these things haven't been done is complicated, and there's really entrenched interests that are going to fight against it. And so we're going to need to be able to tell a story of the things that we're fighting for, the progress that we're making, but also the reason why it's not moving faster, right? So that's going to be big. And, I'm in this race, right? There was more corporate PAC spending against me than has ever been spent in a Seattle race against a candidate. And a lot of those same interests are also going to want to undermine my administration. And so I'm going into this with, I think, clear-eyed about the challenges, the political challenges, as well as the practical challenges of implementing my agenda. It's going to be a massive challenge, but I'm really excited about it as well.
Well, Katie, I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you're probably super busy right now and really in the thick of things. I won't say congratulations yet because I don't want to jinx the result, but I'm very excited to see what you do with the position, and I hope you'll come back and check in with us in the future.
I would love to. Thank you.
Yeah, it's our pleasure.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.